ladies and gentlemen. This is Jeff Rains coming to you again with Foundation of Civilization. I wanted to do a video to analyze something that I think that is some things that are coming up recently. We've had a lot of discussion about the United States and NATO and the status of the conflict between the West and Russia and the emerging alliance between Russia and China, which there are a lot of intricacies, a lot of interesting things that are happening. However, I don't think things are going to fall out quite as advertised. In fact, I'm certain that very little of what is advertised is going to come out. The A quick rundown as I look over the numbers of the current capabilities of NATO members. I I have to ask myself what NATO is thinking, what the NATO members are thinking. And I realize, and I always ask myself, what's going on behind the scenes? What are they telling us, or what are they not telling us? And what are they really trying to accomplish? So, as far as NATO, and the current situation that I see is that the United States is trying to disengage its conflict with Russia through Ukraine. And I know that there's a lot of discussion every which way about how to go about it, what to do, who needs to do what. I am constantly amused, even by people who are fairly well educated in the matter. Some things are likely, some things are just not likely at all. And the pundits, they're just a complete waste of time. And it doesn't matter whether it's right or left. They just try to promote an idea that is going to advance their cause. They don't really care about the results, and they don't, as long as their person is able to be in charge and decide what fate the world has or their country has. So I wanted to do a quick analysis here on NATO capability, current capability. And in the past, I think we need to be concerned about what we have available right now, uh, and look at some of the alliances that we have, and I guess some of the concerns that we could have with it. NATO, uh, and I'm looking at NATO right now without the United States. They currently have about 5.8 million people, soldiers available, with a $670 billion defense budget between all of the NATO nations. And a quick rundown of those NATO nations. We're and some of them, we're talking about Albania, Belgium, Bulgaria, Canada, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Montenegro, Netherlands, North Macedonia, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Turkey, United Kingdom, and the United States. Now, I am going to separate out the United States because as I see things unfolding right now, it looks like the United States wants to disengage from the greater part of NATO. And so, without the United States, NATO has listed 5.8 million people, soldiers available for combat. Those are active duty and reserves. Now, as I look at it, though, 1.2 million of those people are in Turkey, and Turkey is an interesting has an interesting circumstance because depending on what time of day it is or what day it is, they could be leaning either to NATO or to Russia because they're right there, right next to Russia. And uh, another something else that I noted is that uh, uh, 900,000 of these troops, over 900,000 of these troops, come from Finland. Now, Finland is actually a very small country, population-wise, is a fairly small country, so 900,000 soldiers is pretty extensive. But if you take 1.2 and 900,000, that's 2.1 million soldiers that are no longer available. Now, the rest of the capabilities, though, uh, there NATO, without the United States, has 530 ships. A lot of them are the local patrol vessels. Some of them that they do have quite a few larger ships, the destroyers, frigates, even several aircraft carriers. They have about 9,360 armored vehicles. They have 2,230 aircraft, and all told, about 515 nuclear weapons. Now, if what I see happening happens, that means that they're going to go up against Russia with 1.5 million, current standing army of 1.5 million soldiers versus their 5.8 million soldiers. 181 naval vessels, 13,530 tanks or armored vehicles, 1,517 aircraft. That includes fighters, bombers, helicopters, and Russia's 5,889 nuclear weapons. Now, if the United States is included, the United States has an additional 2.6 million soldiers, 295 ships, including 11 aircraft carriers, uh, 4,645 armored vehicles, 3,368 aircraft, helicopters, fighters, bombers, and various other systems, and the United States 5,244 nuclear weapons. Um, I also wanted to note just very quickly that Russia's alliance is sending them to China, and China has a significant presence also. Although this, uh, it, all the intricacies, all the interactions and the alliances that people have are very interesting, and the economics of the whole thing is what makes it all go round. And if there is a war and a split between China, Russia, and the West, I think it is going to be very, very devastating for Russia, China, and you're just going to see a very new world if something like that happens. As far as the naval power goes, I wanted to note U.S. naval power. Most of the U.S. ships, the 11 aircraft carriers, displace 100,000 tons. That's both the Nimitz class and the Ford class. The Nimitz class, I apologize. I meant to find out how many aircraft they carry, but I'm assuming that that's pretty close to the same as the Ford since they displace about the same amount, which is 75 aircraft. By way of comparison, the rest of the NATO aircraft carriers, the French aircraft carriers are 42,500 tons, and they carry 30 to 40 aircraft, which includes the new Rafale. Relatively new, I say new, relatively new. It's only about 20 years old. And the U.S. aircraft carriers, I will note that most of them carry the F-18 and the F-35. F-18 is gosh, 40, actually probably a 50-year-old. It was designed 50 years ago, and it's being updated and be replaced by the current F-35. The Italians have two aircraft carriers. One displaces 30,000 tons, the other 38,000 tons, and they carry either 12 to 22 aircraft, uh, including helicopters and the F-35s. The UK has two aircraft carriers, and they displace 80,600 tons, which they're the largest of the NATO fleet, and they carry 40 aircraft. The Spanish have one aircraft carrier, which displaces 27,000 tons, and 31 aircraft, including the old reliable AV-8B, and it's being replaced by the F-35s. They will go up against the Russians, and if they're called into the Chinese, uh, the Russians have one aircraft carrier, the Kuznetsov, which they've had for quite a while. It displaces 58,000 tons, carries 30 aircraft, 18 of which are the relatively new Su-33s. The Su-33s are a very capable airframe. Uh, so, in my quick analysis here, although many countries have many ships, a lot of them are small. A lot of destroyers, a lot of frigates. But NATO naval power is pretty much U.S. naval power. The luckily for NATO, the Russians have one aircraft carrier, and if by some chance they called on the Chinese have two aircraft carriers, and the last I heard, one of them was breaking apart and catching on fire. At least one of them was. Aircraft carriers are very difficult to build. Fortunately for the United States, we've been building them for since before World War II, I think since the 1920s, the teens maybe, and we've proven very capable with them. As far as the armor goes, the United States uses the M1 tank. The British build their own, the Challenger tank. The French build the Leclerc, and the Germans build the Leopard. I believe they're on the Leopard 2 tank. Uh, all of those are very capable tanks. They'll go up against the T-80s and the T-92s, and they. I'll talk about the Armada tank in just a minute, but they have the Western tanks have proven very capable against the Russian all the Russian armor. Now that's not to say that the Russians can't destroy the Western tanks. They can, uh, but they odds are in NATO's favor as far as armor goes. Aircraft, very similar. In fact, the biggest problem that the Russians have is they haven't had the money to train their pilots, and I won't say it always. Most almost always comes down to the training of the pilots. You can take pilots of moderate capability and put them in old airframes and give them time to plan, and they will defeat inexperienced pilots in new airframes with little planning. They that's just the way of warfare. The West has quite a few very capable airframes. The NATO flies the Eurofighter. The French fly the Rafale, and even though both of those are about 20 years old, they're still more than capable of going up against the latest Russian aircraft. Um, but comes down to training, and I apologize, I have not checked to see how much training the average Russian pilot has versus the average Western pilot. The but the trump card comes down to nuclear weapons. As I noted, NATO, without the United States, has 500 nuclear weapons. Russia by itself has 5,889 nuclear weapons. I have no doubt that if it comes to it and NATO decides to attack Russia, they will be using nuclear weapons. And a side note, China, it's kind of funny. They list that they have 410 nuclear weapons. They have listed that, I believe, for 20, 30 years. They have not updated that list. I don't trust that number at all. My guess is that their numbers are probably in the 5,000, maybe a little more category of nuclear weapons. But all of this calls into question. Uh, all the capabilities are called into question by the leaders of NATO, and some of them in particular, I am going to cite General Sir Patrick Sanders as he was stepping down and he's calling into question their ability to be able to build weapons, weapon systems. And I will quote from from the article from the Wavell Room on the 14th of February 20 of this year, 2025. The Sanders assessment of the British Army decline was as explicit as he dared to be, but full of implicit warnings that will be lost on most people. He was absolutely right to make the case to rearm as fast as we can, a huge challenge given the sclerotic acquisition process. What was left largely unsaid is the inability of the Army to prepare, deploy, and sustain itself in the field. That that is very, very key. The article goes on to note that during the Cold War, when they used to spend around 6% of GDP on defense, the Army had four deployable divisions that exercised as a core within NATO. Now they're not sure that they can do it. I've also run across several articles that have noted that many of the German youth are not fit to fight. They won't pass a basic physical fitness test. Many of the British, French have the same problem. Italians, oh, I'm not sure, but I imagine they have the same problem. So let me do a little bit more analysis real quick here on NATO's capabilities. NATO coordination, fortunately, they've got a very good technological advantage and communications ability. But NATO has over 19 languages that they'd have to communicate in. As I noted, from Finnish to Italian, German, French, and sometimes the German and French don't get along very well. Also, the English. Fortunately, most of the countries are capable in English. Russia, they've got one language that they have to worry about. Unfortunately for them, their communication systems are not on the same level as the West. Training for the soldiers in whatever field they're in, whether it be infantry, armor, telecommunications, artillery. It's very good for US, UK, France, Germany. I'll even extend that to Turkey, Finland, Norway, Sweden. Probably pretty moderate for the Russians and the Spanish, even the Chinese. Transportation capabilities. NATO has multiple modes for sea, land, and air. Russia they've got very limited ability in the sea, but they've got pretty good land and I'm going to say moderate air transportation capabilities. Anybody who has done any analysis on military, as have, they hopefully get to the point where they understand that tactics and strategy are only relevant for a short period of time. Ultimately, it comes down to logistics. And that was part of the warning that General Sir Patrick Sanders gave. They've got to update their acquisition process. And a quick analysis on the logistics capabilities of the NATO countries. Manufacturing is fairly good in many of the NATO countries, although it is a little anemic at the moment. I just get the sense that the British, the French, the Germans, and even the Italians and Spanish are going to be able to figure out how to build weapons pretty quickly if they need to. Uh, but they do buy a lot of their weapons through the United States, especially missile systems and communications and radar tracking systems. Now, they've also most of these have noted that with the war in Ukraine, many many of the NATO countries have been donating weapons or selling them, unofficially selling them to Ukraine. And Ukraine has used them or lost them. Uh, in some cases, we're also getting reports that these weapons and weapon systems are being sold on the black market, and some have made their way even down to Mexican drug cartels. The use or loss of these weapons makes the manufacturing weapons manufacturers excited because the governments will have to make more, and so they're going to spend a lot of money to do that. Most of NATO at least has a moderate ability to make these weapons and weapon systems. From the German Taurus missiles, the British Storm Shadows, the radar tracking systems, the guns, uniforms, radios, and such. Russia, Russia has a problem. They have very limited ability to produce weapons. They have tons and tons of weapons in storage, but making new weapons is a challenge for them. And the big problem is Russia's education system. It has not been up to par with the West since the fall of the Soviet Union. They have some specialized institutions and manufacturing facilities so they can build the new Armada tank, but they cannot build them at scale. They cannot build them in grand numbers that they would need if they're going to go to war with NATO. Who has very good manufacturing systems? USA, UK, France, Germany. I'll even include Turkey and Germany. Moderate levels, like I said, Russia, um, at least Russia, Czech Republic even has some very good systems. Poland, they can manufacture quite a bit, but nearly every modern war has also had a technological development. I remember in the first Gulf War, the technology advanced with the bombing systems, and we reduced the number of B-2 bombers from 132 to down to 32. In fact, I think we ended up with 31 B-2 bombers because before the Gulf War started, we were calculating how many sorties we had to fly to hit targets. After we got the data back, we realized that we were started to calculate um, how many targets per sortie we were able to hit. Now, as I started this video off, I mentioned that I am concerned about what's going on behind closed doors. And I think something is happening here. As the there's a observable shift in policy with the change in the U.S. presidency. I just get the sense that there's a bit of play going on, and the general public and in uh, all of the NATO countries and in Russia, we're being played. Many of you probably caught the dust up between the Ukrainian president and the U.S. president in the Oval Office. The and upon leaving that meeting, the U.S. president ended support for Ukraine. No more weapons, no more money, and within a couple of days, they also ended the intelligence support. Now, after 10 days, that all of that support was reinstated, which makes me wonder what else, who said what else is going on behind the scenes? I got the sense, first of all, I got the sense that the support was going to be reinstated at some point anyway. But I also got the sense that this may have been for the public's consumption. They have a public spat, and the U.S. ends support. All of a sudden, within over the weekend, that following weekend, the NATO European countries got together without the United States and said, "Hey, okay, what are we going to do?" And they all came into the agreement that they're going to build more weapons and they're going to supply more to their defense industries. Um, that. that got me to realize that maybe this maybe this was all staged so that the U.S. president could play the heel and he could be the bad guy, and everybody get, especially Europeans, could get mad at him, and they would have the excuse to send more money to their defense industry. I I see all kinds of things like that happening, and the Ukrainian president, he could remain the good guy, and I just question, well, I question a lot of things. I'm very skeptical of what I see in the media, what I see happening. And I truly believe that many of the politicians, uh, they secretly get along pretty well. So that's what I believe is happening with this. The shift is on from the United States running a proxy war in Ukraine, and it's going to be handed off to NATO in the near future. Meanwhile, the United States is staging things so that they can prepare for another war in the Middle East, this time with Iran. And although they have talks going on, there's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of ooh, uh, I don't want to say violent rhetoric, but well, essentially it is violent rhetoric. A lot of threats going back and forth between Iran and the United States and the Iranian proxies in the Middle East. At the moment, we're looking at the Houthi rebels in down in Yemen. This, well, this just exemplifies one of the things that is happening. I do believe that we're having a buildup, a defense buildup. Most of the European countries have said for a while that people need to be prepared, need to get ready, and that they need to build up their defense uh, industry. As I heard it, in some areas, the Europe buys 80% of their weapons systems from the United States. And if the United States is busy, that means that, and fighting somebody else, that means that we're not going to have the money or the weapon systems available for others, which means that Europe needs to build up their systems. Um, well, this concludes my thoughts for today, and I hope that you guys are doing well, and hope that you're getting prepared for the changes that are coming along. And apparently, some of y'all, especially if you're in Europe, need to start working out, getting fit, because it looks like we are going to have another war uh, added on to the current Russia-Ukraine war. And at some point, don't forget that China wants to take Taiwan back. Just remember that there are a lot of ups and downs and ifs and buts and a lot of things that are tied to the any kind of interaction that goes on. Uh, please like, share, and subscribe. Again, this is Jeff Rains coming to you with Foundation of Civilization, and I just wanted to let you know what I see happening in the very near future with our countries and all of the associations that they have, all of the interactions and agreements that they have. Um, Thank you very much for listening, and hope that you all have a wonderful day. And I'll look forward to talking to you again. Much love.